Welcome to my English class of 10. In the last class, we studied about a scientist. His name is Griffin. And we also learned that he had found a drug which could make human body invisible. He himself consumed that drug and he became invisible. After many adventures, he left the crowded London and reached Iping, a village. There he booked 2 rooms in an inn. Now, let me continue the chapter Footprints Without Feet. Satisfied that her guest was an eccentric scientist, and in view of the fact that he had paid her in advance, Mrs. Hall was prepared to excuse his strange habits and irritable temper. The landlord's wife, Mrs. Hall, understood that the man was an eccentric scientist. What is the meaning of eccentric? Behaving in a strange manner. And she also understood that he was short tempered. But here she was ready to excuse, ready to forgive his strange habits and bad tempered nature, as he had paid the rent in advance. But the stolen money didn't last long, and presently Griffin had to admit that he had no more ready cash. He pretended, however, that he was expecting a check to arrive at any moment. We know that how he got the money, and all he had stolen that money from the shopkeeper in the theatrical company, and anyway that money got over. But to hide the truth, he had to act in front of the landlady that he was waiting for a check, that he tried to convince her through acting that it could arrive at any moment. Shortly afterwards, a curious episode occurred. Very early in the morning, a clergyman and his wife were awakened by noises in the study. Creeping downstairs, they heard the chink of money being taken from the clergyman's desk. And after that, there was a strange incident took place, occurred, or happened. Clergyman is a priest. Okay, who's clergyman? He is a priest. Clergyman and his wife were awakened very early in the morning because they heard some noises from the study room. What is study room? The office room or living room. So when they heard the sound, they climbed down the stairs. Creeping downstairs means they climbed down the stairs, and the sound and they could hear the chink of the money, means that the sound of the money, that somebody was taking the money from the clergyman's desk. Without making any noise and with a poker grasped firmly in his hand, the clergyman flung open the door. Surrender. What's the meaning of poker? Poker means an iron rod. Okay, a long iron rod. So the clergyman had a poker in his hand, and he came down and suddenly he opened the door. When he came down, he suddenly opened the door. He thought that there must be a thief inside, and he asked him to surrender. Then, to his amazement, he realized that the room appeared to be empty. He and his wife looked under the desk and behind the curtains and even up the chimney. There was not a sign of anybody, yet the desk had been opened and the housekeeping money was missing. But to his surprise, when he opened the door, nobody was there. So then they searched everywhere in the house, under the desk, behind the curtains, and even up the chimney. But they couldn't see anyone there. And they also found out that the desk was opened and the money inside it was missing. They realized that somebody had come and stole their money and had left their house with that money. Extraordinary affair, the clergyman kept saying for the rest of the day. The clergyman couldn't believe what had happened in his house because when he was coming down the stairs, he could hear the sound of taking money. But when he opened the door, he couldn't see that there a thief. So he kept on saying that it was an extraordinary affair or an extraordinary event because he was shocked by the incident. But it was not as extraordinary as the behavior of Mrs. Hall's furniture a little later that morning. But the incident which had happened in the house of clergyman was not extraordinary as the incident which happened in the house of Mrs. Hall's in that morning. It was much more fascinating. The landlord and his wife were up very early and were surprised to see the scientist's door wide open. Usually it was shut and locked, and he was furious if anyone entered his room. When Mrs. Hall and her husband got up very early in the morning, they were surprised to see that the door of scientist's room was opened. Usually his room's door was locked, and he would be very angry if anybody tried to come inside his room. The opportunity seemed too good to be missed. They peeped round the door, saw nobody, and decided to investigate. So they thought that it was the best opportunity to go inside the room and see what was there inside his room. And they didn't want to miss that opportunity. They peeped round the door, saw nobody, and decided to investigate. So they looked through the door and they found out that nobody was there inside. So they decided to investigate in the room. The bedclothes were called, showing that the scientist must have been up for some time, and strangers still, the clothes and bandages that he always wore were lying about the room. They found out that the bedclothes were cold, which shows that he was woken up very early in the morning. All of his clothes and the bandages that he used to cover his face, everything was strewn around the room. All of a sudden, Mrs. Hall heard a sniff close to her ear. Suddenly, Mrs. Hall heard some sniffing noise near her ear. A moment later, the hat on the bedpost leapt up and dashed itself into her face. See, bedpost is the pole on four sides of the bed. So here what happened? The hat of the stranger was on one of the bedposts. Suddenly the hat was coming through the air and it hit on her face. Then the bedroom chair became alive. Then what happened? The bedroom chair started moving. Springing into the air, it charged straight at her, legs foremost. So the chair started moving itself and it came straight towards her and hit in her legs. As she and her husband turned away in terror, the extraordinary chair pushed them both out of the room and then appeared to slam and lock the door after them. Actually, what was happening inside the room? The invisible man was there and he was trying to play these tricks on them. He was trying to frighten them. So when all these things happened in their room, they got scared. So Mrs. Hall and her husband, they were running out of the room. At that time, what happened now? The chair pushed both of them outside and the door was closed by itself. Mrs. Hall almost fell down the stairs in hysterics. She was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits and that the stranger had somehow caused these to enter into her furniture. Mrs. Hall became so frightened and she was about to fall down the staircase. What is the meaning of hysterics? Hysterics means that she became so emotional. She became out of her control. Okay, her emotions were out of her control. So she thought that some ghost was there in her room. Ghosts were there in her room. And because of the stranger, that ghost entered into the inn and then entered into her furniture. So all those things happened because of the stranger. She thought like that. My poor mother used to sit in that chair, she mourned, to think it should rise up against me now. She was feeling so bad that the chair was used by her mother, and she was crying by thinking that how could the chair rise up against her. The feeling among the neighbors was that the trouble was caused by witchcraft. So soon this news, what happened in the house of Miss Hall, spread among the neighbors also. So the neighbors of Mrs. Hall thought that it was witchcraft. What is witchcraft? Witchcraft is black magic. So because of the witchcraft, such things happened in the inn. They thought like that. But witchcraft or not, when news of the burglary at the clergyman's home became known, the strange scientist was strongly suspected of having had a hand in it. Suspicion grew even stronger when he suddenly produced some ready cash, though he had admitted not long before that he had no money. But after some time, the news of the robbery at the clergyman's house came to be known. Everybody started to know that the robbery that what happened in the priest's house. So everybody started suspecting that it should be the scientist who had done the robbery. And why they had suspected? Because of the strange behavior of that scientist. And what happened immediately after that? Immediately after the robbery, the scientist gave the money to Mrs. Hall. So that also made suspicion stronger, because first he said that he didn't have the money. So Mrs. Hall suspected that. Then from where did he get that money? Now he had produced to her. The village constable was secretly sent for. Instead of waiting for the constable, Mrs. Hall went to the scientist, who had somehow mysteriously appeared from his empty bedroom. So they all were doubtful about this stranger and the incidents which were happening in and around Mrs. Hall's house. So they secretly called the village constable. But here Mrs. Hall, she didn't wait for constable to come. She went to the scientist's room to know whether he was there or not. Then she was surprised to see that the scientist was there. The scientist was there inside his room. And why was she surprised? Because she didn't see him coming inside. I want to know what you have been doing to my chair upstairs, she demanded. And I want to know how it is you came out of an empty room and how you entered a locked room. So when she had seen him there, she asked him what he had been doing to her chairs, and she also wanted to know from him that how did he come out of that empty room, because nobody was there before, and how he entered a locked room without anybody noticing it. The scientist was always quick-tempered. Now he became furious. You don't understand who or what I am, he shouted. Very well, I'll show you. He became very angry when she asked such question to her. We all know that he had an irritable temper. So he got very angry and he said that you don't know who I am and I'll show you who I am. He started shouting at her. Suddenly he threw off bandages, whiskers, spectacles and even nose. It took him only a minute to do this. So the horrified people in the bar found themselves staring at a headless man. So he wanted to frighten her. So what did he do? He removed his bandages, whiskers, spectacles and his false nose, even his false nose. Now the empty head of that scientist was seen there. So within a minute he was able to do that. Behind Mrs. Hall, other people also came up to see what was happening there. They saw a man who was not having heard, because he had thrown away all the things which had covered his head and face. Mr. Jaffers, the constable, now arrived and was quite surprised to find that he had to arrest a man without a head. But Jaffers was easily prevented from doing his duty. Was not easily prevented from doing his duty. If a magistrate's warrant ordered a person's arrest, then that person had to be arrested, with or without his head. When Mr. Jaffer, the constable, was also surprised, he was also surprised because he had to arrest a man without head. But Jaffers, he was a duty-bound man. But Jaffers was not easily prevented from doing his duty, means that he was a duty-bound man. He was a dutiful person because he wanted to do his duty. If he had because he had the warrant to arrest that person. So he was ready to arrest a person whether he had a head or not. There followed a remarkable scene as the policeman tried to get hold of a man who was becoming more and more invisible as he threw off one garment after another. Now we can see a remarkable scene there as the police was struggling to get hold of the stranger. What was the stranger doing at that time? He was becoming more and more invisible by removing his clothes one after the other. Finally, a shirt flew into the air, and the constable found himself struggling with someone he could not see at all. After throwing his shirt, he became completely invisible, and Mr. Jaffer was struggling to find the man who was invisible. Some people tried to help him but found themselves hit by blows that seemed to come from nowhere. The people who were older, they also tried to help to catch the invisible man. But then they were getting hit by somebody from all the directions. In the end, Jaffers was knocked unconscious as he made a last attempt to hold on to the unseen scientist. Finally, he got a strong blow from the scientist. Then he became unconscious and fell down. There were nervous, excited cries of "Hold him!" but this was easier said than done. Then people began to shout, "Hold him and catch him!" But it was not easy to catch him because he was totally invisible. Nobody could see him. Griffin had shaken himself free, and no one knew where to lay hands on him. So, what he had done, the scientist, he had set himself free. He tried to escape from there, and nobody could understand how to catch him as he was completely invisible. So, in this chapter, we can see that how Griffin the scientist misused his powers of invisibility only for his own personal gains and for hurting others and not for the good of mankind.